Hi, this is Renoka. I've done a time lapse of me designing a character for a game. I haven't really put much thought into it, I just started drawing. I thought I'd add a commentary to this time lapse. You can always mute the video if you don't want to listen to me talking and just want to watch me draw. But I thought I'd explain a few of the things I was doing. So this is the first attempt I made. It's quite a rough one. I didn't particularly like how it turned out, but I included it in the video to show you where I started off and how it ended. This is the rough for the second attempt that I did. This one came out a lot better, and this is one that I went with in the end. Just adding some main features. I tried to make them a lot bolder in this one so that they read a lot easier during the game, because the character would be a lot smaller. Tried to make sure that I wasn't moving around too much so you could watch the character being drawn without it jittering around. So now I'm using a darker pen and I'm redrawing the body parts with clearer lines, slightly altering the design a tiny bit, but mostly keeping to it. I've made some of the shapes more defined. Here I've made the head more square and more defined. Tightening up the general shapes. At this point I'm thinking the character is probably kind of like an environmentalist that goes into dangerous areas to do cleanup jobs and stuff, so I've given him some goggles and a sort of protective suit and stuff, and a warning logo on his belt. Not too sure what the backpack's for at this point, but I've just added some random details. That could very well change later on, but you gotta start somewhere and then make decisions later on. It's drawing the backhand. Since it's obscured by the body, I've drawn the rest for when I'm doing the animation. Drawing the whole of the body again for animation, so I don't need to fill in gaps while I'm doing the animation. A lot of the lines are overlapping at this point, but I'm going to make it more defined by filling the back of the shapes in with white. At this point I'm just finishing off some of the lines. Just changing the background to a really light grey so that I can see where the white is, to see which parts I still need to fill in. Just drawing a shape behind the head because there's too many details to join them all together and I want to make it more flexible. Just drawing the rest of the belt because it was in two separate parts. Filling in some of the ends so that I can fill it with white. I'm grouping all the parts together while I'm doing this to make them a lot easier to separate and to focus on while I'm drawing them. Now I'm starting to block in some of the colours. I've just chosen a colour, which probably change a few times, but you've got to choose something to compare them against each other. Also tidying up the lines for the facial features. Using the selection arrow you can push and pull the lines to sort of tweak their shape. Choosing some different hair colours at this point. Decided to start with brown, but later on I try out some different colours. I'm not too keen on using black as an outline colour for characters, so I'm going to use some darker versions of the colours for the outlines, so darker brown, darker pink. I'm not too sure what colour the goggles should be at this point, so I've done them as sort of cartoony light blue. Just adding the darker outline colour for the skin. I've done the colour of the eyes a separate colour. Some people would have done the outline for the eyes in black, but I've gone for a light blue grey colour. This helps you focus more on the eyes instead of the pupils of the eyes rather than the white parts. Just filling in some of the parts that didn't have shapes for the belt straps and stuff. I'm not too sure what the light and the antenna on the backpack are for, but I just added some random details. I might change those later on depending on how the game turns out and what the mechanics are, because they might need to be a bit more functional later on. I've kept the lips separate to make animating later on a lot easier. At this point, I'm trying out some different colours for the costume because I wasn't sure about green, but I just chose some random colours. At this point, I quite like the olive colour, so I try out a couple of variations of that one. Try the backpack in red, but I still prefer it in dark green at the moment, making the features more saturated in that one. At this point, I've chosen to go with blue for the costume because I think that since he's cleaning up environmental experiments and stuff, the enemies will probably be green slime and stuff like that. So I wanted to keep that, make his costume distinct colour from green. Also, I was thinking I might have a little bit of cartoon gore, blood and stuff, so I didn't want his costume to be red, otherwise that wouldn't stand out enough. But then again, if I change my mind on that, I might change the suit. Here I'm just trying out some different hair colours. I think I still prefer brown at this point, but I'm not too keen on the colour of the goggles, so I keep experimenting. At this point, I've made the goggles black, so they're a bit more sort of special ops rather than school science lab. Setting some details, reflections and stuff. I'm swapping in the new goggles to compare with the different hair colours. I zoomed out to see what it would look like small, sort of in-game size. And it's definitely more readable on the light brown hair. So this is the one that I've gone with. These are the base colours that I'm happy with at this point. I'm just adding some shadows and some highlights. I'm using the line tool and I'm bending into shape and then breaking it apart and filling in where it cuts the fill. Just tidying up the lines here as well as I go. Adding some highlights. It's kind of giving it a bit of texture. I want it to be sort of shiny, rubbery type suit, I guess. Kind of like it's a sort of protection suit. The sort of thing you'd probably wear if you're going into a sewer. Adding some highlights onto his belt logo. I think it's sufficiently shiny now. Making the details on his backpack look a bit more metallic. I'm not being too precious here because I'm not sure if I'm going to keep them or not. I'm just blocking something in so they don't stand out too much. Just adding some extra details for the goggle, something reflecting in them. Giving it a bit more shape. Most of the body is covered up by his arms and stuff, so I'm just making more of it shaded. Now I'm adding some of the highlights and the shadows in his skin. It's a bit fiddly deciding where to actually put the shadows at this point. Just gone with this for now. Made the top height lighter than the side to make it a bit more 3D looking. Just copied in the colours to make it easier to, made a little palette to make it easier to select the colours while I'm drawing the face. Adding some shadows under his eye to give his face a bit more depth, but also to make him look a bit older, a bit more rugged. Like he's been doing this job for a while. So essentially he's a more experienced cleanup guy, and he's being brought in on a special mission of some sort. But probably not particularly glamorous work. I'm trying to be careful not to add too much detail on the hair, because you're not going to see most detail in a game while it's moving and when it's more zoomed out. Decided to make his nose a bit red, a bit more weathered, make him look a bit older. Also, don't want to use white on his eyes, so I've made them a really dull yellow colour, and I've added some highlights too. Now I'm just making his ears a bit more red, like his nose. Adding a bit more detail to the siren lamp on his backpack. The final part now, just tidying up the hair, cleaning up the lines, and then adding some small detail. I've decided to add a bit of detail on the top of the head because it looks quite a bit flat but I can always remove these details quite easily later on if I don't want to keep them. Just playing around with which direction to make the detail. So that's it. Now a comparison of the different stages. Next stage, I'm going to be animating this character, doing a few different animations like idle and walk cycles. So join me for that. I'll upload a new video soon. Thanks, bye.